Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I know that people are coming and they're getting here at different points, but we have a full agenda, so we are going to start. We want to welcome you to this event. In 2016, we had the International Year of the Pulse. That went so very well that today, 3 days from now, February 10th, is the inaugural Pulse Day, the first World's Pulse Day. And to top that off, we've added the 2018 Global Nutrition Report. We have quite an esteemed group in the room, and we're looking forward to the discussions. Dr. Kish Wassan, where are you?
Right here.
Okay, please take over.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody. My name is Kishore Wassan, Professor and Dean in the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition. And first and foremost, I think I want to thank everyone for coming out on a relatively cold day here in our beautiful province of Saskatchewan. Right now, there's a running bet in my household, how long will my car last? I mean, I'm into 4 days now, so that's pretty good. But on behalf of the college, but also the university, unfortunately, our Vice President of Research, Dr. Karen Chad, could not be with us today. She's traveling overseas in India on university business, a little bit warmer there. But I did speak to Karen by email, and she asked me on her behalf to bring greetings on behalf of the university. As you know, food security and the work we do, particularly in collaboration with our colleagues in agriculture, is a major signature area here at the University of Saskatchewan. And I think what you're going to hear today is really important, game-changing information, as well as what we can do as a community to make a societal impact. And so I think that, first of all, I want to congratulate Carol and her team. Thank Wilf Keller and the colleagues at Ag West Bio. Thank our colleagues in the College of Agriculture and Bioresources, as well as the Home Economics Group and the Edith Bowl Simpson Lectureship Committee for really their co-sponsorship. It takes a village of people to make this happen. So I think a round of applause for all those folks for everything that they've done to put this together. So with that, the first and foremost is we've also had tremendous support from the Saskatchewan government. I think over the number of years, the government has been very supportive of a lot of the research and the work and the things that we're going to talk about today. And so it's a pleasure to have Eric Olauson from the government. I've known Eric for quite a while. He always comes in and does a great job in presenting on behalf of the government to bring greetings on behalf of the government of Saskatchewan. So Eric, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kish, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me here on a very cold afternoon. So welcome, fellow dignitaries and friends, and in the case of Mr. Rob Norris, former colleagues. On behalf of Premier Scott Moe and the Government of Saskatchewan, it's my pleasure to join you this afternoon as we take time to celebrate the first ever World Pulses Day. I'm also grateful to be here for the Canadian launch of the 2018 Global Nutrition Report, as well as the tribute to Dr. Edith Rouse Simpson. Special thanks to Shauna and the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition for your invitation. The world is hungry for the pulses we produce. Pulses have grown to become one of Saskatchewan's most important exports. Saskatchewan exported more than $2.5 billion worth of pulses to the world in 2017. We are the leading Canadian province in the production and research of pulses, including lentils, peas, and chickpeas. In 2017, we were also Canada's leading province in the number of seeded acres in lentils, peas, and chickpeas, totaling more than 6 million acres. Saskatchewan is also the world's largest exporter of peas and lentils. Saskatchewan farmers produce an average of approximately 4 to 5 million metric tons of pulses annually. Saskatchewan is well known for the quality of these crops, and agri-value companies are stepping in to make investments into further processing these crops. AGT Food and Ingredients has been here from the beginning, working with producers and crop development scientists to perfect the types of pulses best suited for processing and exporting. Growing with the province's pulse sector since it started in 2003, the Regina-based company now has 20 facilities in Saskatchewan. In 2013, AgroCorp Processing opened what is now a $20 million high-throughput pulse grain and oilseed facility in Moose Jaw. In 2016, it moved its Canadian headquarters to Moose Jaw, demonstrating its commitment to its business here. In 2017, Verdient Foods opened a multi-million-dollar pea processing plant in Vanscoy, which they expect to become the largest organic pea protein, the largest organic pea protein plant in North America. Pulses are helping to grow our economy. Farmers around the world grow pulses because they are one of the most sustainable crops in the world, and they're also a sustainable source of low-fat protein. So we know that pulses are good for our economy, good for our environment, and good for our health. That is why I'm so pleased to help acknowledge and celebrate the first ever World Pulses Day. This day will bring heightened awareness of the vital role pulses play in the pursuit of global food security, along with providing an opportunity for Saskatchewan to showcase its leadership and pursue further export market development. Thank you very much and enjoy the evening.
Thank you very much, Eric. Really appreciate, again, the government's support over the last number of years. Next, I have the pleasure to introducing Dean and Professor of the College of Agriculture and Bioresources, Dr. Mary Bird, to bring greetings on behalf of her college. Mary?
Good afternoon, everybody. It really is wonderful to be here. The College of Agriculture and Bioresources has the really great honor of having housed Dr. Al Slinkard in our college. And Dr. Slinkard was the one who actually started growing of pulses in the prairies and in Saskatchewan. So 40 years ago, you would have seen about 0 acres planted to pulses. And you've heard the statistics on what pulses are doing now for the Saskatchewan economy and for world nutrition. We have continued with all of that work, in particular breeding and managing of a wide variety of different pulses, adapting these, what used to be hotland crops to Saskatchewan, to the point at which we are indeed the world's largest exporter. Basically, Canada is the world's largest exporter of lentils when you look at it in terms of nations, and we produce 90% of Canada's lentils, so that's sort of the way it goes. We are breeding all of these different pulses, not just for their weather, but other stress resistance as well, whether it's pests or dry land, whether it's the very late crop planting and the short seasons that we have. You name it, we can do it, but we are also developing crops that will grow all the way around the world. These crops are celebrated around the world and used around the world, and Canada is starting to get on that kick. Canada's food guide will show that to you, but we are way behind in domestic consumption of these healthy products, and it's certainly something that we ought to be paying attention to. But I suspect that the most important thing that we've been involved in is the sharing of our knowledge and what these crops can do with our global partners around the world. The Global Nutrition Report obviously tells us a lot about the state of the world's nutrition, but what you folks may or may not all know is the huge role that Carol Henry has played in bringing that nutritional change to a number of our partner countries. And I was in Ethiopia just less than a year ago when we were celebrating 20 years of partnership with Hawassa University, where it started with us doing soil work and grew into pulses, and then Carol took over, and we've been doing all kinds of human nutrition and getting this out. She has developed over 40,000 farmer partners in Ethiopia who are learning how to grow pulses and use pulses. And at this celebration, they had a couple of these partner farmers come in and speak to this crowd, and one of them was this tiny little lady who had been part of the project for a while. And she spoke, and what she said was that she said a number of wonderful things, but basically the thing that really stuck with me was that she had a neighbor of hers come up to her and say, "How can I get involved in this project that you're working on?" And our partner said, "Well, I'll try to connect you, but how did you know I was working on this project?" And the other woman said, "Well, your children are so tall and healthy, it's obvious." And that's the kind of difference that pulses can make. And that's why it is absolutely amazing to be here to celebrate World Pulses Day. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mary. And I should note that really in the last decade, with Bob Tyler and the gang at Agriculture and Bioresources, I think the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition and Agriculture have worked really well together in making a societal impact and difference. And I think we've got to continue to do that, particularly these days, as it seems like we're really we think every time we put one step forward, we end up going 2 steps backwards. So this is really not only an important event, but these collaborations are critical to our success. With that, our next greetings is Mr. Bill Grove, who is the CEO of Protein Industries Canada. So Bill? Yeah. All right, thank you.
Great. I'm kind of the new kid on the block here, bringing greetings, and so it's not really my forte. But anyway, for those of you who don't understand or know what Protein Industries Canada is, we're a not-for-profit corporation established to administer science and innovation funding on behalf of the federal government, and really our role is to grow the value-added processing sector in Western Canada. And so some of you might be thinking about what our connection is to Global Pulses Day and the nutrition report. I think the reality for us is that we're building on the strengths of investments that have been made not only by the government of Saskatchewan, but by the 3 provincial governments and the federal government over the last 50 years in the development of the agriculture sector, of the pulse sector in Western Canada, combining that with the great work of the University of Saskatchewan and the Land-Grant University and the agriculture colleges in Western Canada, to then take that to the next step, which is increasing our value-added processing industry in Western Canada. So we'll be administering a $150 million grant that we'll be investing into the value-added processing sector over the next 5 years in collaboration with the private sector. And so make no mistake about it, we're an economic development agency, but I think a lot of the trends and things that we're seeing reflected in the Global Nutrition Report today underpin changing diets that are required globally, and that is a market that we certainly want to hit and help develop over the next 5 years. So the investments that Protein Industries Canada will span the value chain from investments in breeding and genomics, primary agriculture, value-added processing, and market developments. And so we're looking very forward to participating in World Pulse Days. It underpins our competitive advantage in Western Canada, and certainly is one of the things that we'll be looking to draw upon as our experiences as we build out the value-added processing sector in Western Canada. So thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to participating.
You said 150 million? Yeah, okay, we should talk afterwards then. All right. And so next, it's a pleasure to have Miss Andriana Romas from Global Affairs Canada. Global Affairs Canada has been a very big supporter of the work that's gone on, not only in our college, but also overall at the University of Saskatchewan. So we're very pleased to have Adriana here. Is she here? Yep. She's here. There we go. Great. Okay, great.
Good afternoon. On behalf of Global Affairs Canada, I would like to give a special thanks to the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition, along with the Edith Rolls Simpson Lecture Series, for organizing today's event. This annual celebration of pulses presents a tremendous opportunity to raise awareness of the critical of the critical role that pulses play in addressing the challenges of poverty, food security, and nutrition. As indicated in the 2018 Global Nutrition Report, the global burden of malnutrition is unacceptably high and now affects every country in the world, with vulnerable populations disproportionately affected. Food security and malnutrition remain persistent impediments to global prosperity and economic growth and hold back development with unacceptable human consequences. As the biggest source of protein for humans and a vital source of amino acids for people around the world, pulses have a significant role to play in improving nutrition and tackling non-communicable diseases. Nonetheless, pulses are still underrepresented in global food systems, research, and national food policies. The 2018 Global Nutrition Report also highlights that we have never been better equipped to end malnutrition than we are today. To this end, Canada's new international assistance policy, the Feminist International Assistance Policy, is based on evidence that the best and most effective way to eradicate poverty and inequality for everyone is to empower women and girls. Women are, first and foremost, powerful agents of change, and Canada recognizes their crucial role in the eradication of hunger and poverty reduction. Canada's current engagement and continued work on food and nutrition security represents and will increasingly represent how gender transformative approaches will unlock the boundaries and create new space for women and girls in food systems and agriculture. It is urgent that we seize the current window of opportunity to get on track towards the target of ending malnutrition in all its forms by 2030. Canada is committed to the fight against poverty and hunger through the Shared Sustainable Development Program for Humanity, the 2030 Agenda, both at home and around the world. And Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy aligns well with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. And again, Global Affairs Canada has been fantastic in supporting the work that we've done here at the university. You know, the history of the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition, and particularly nutrition, really stems from the College of Home Economics. And over the last number of years, and particularly in the time that I've been dean in the college, I thought it was very important to always celebrate our past and our history. So over the last 5 years, thanks to Mary Beasley and to Millie Reynolds and others who are in the room today, we established a home economics group that has several events throughout the year. But one of the traditions that the Home Economics Group has had long before that I ever started was the Edith Rolls Simpson Lecture Series. And it's very, 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 very prestigious for us to be honoring every year Edith Bowles Simpson, because she was a pioneer not only in home economics, but really in the forefront that ultimately became nutrition in the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition. And we honor that tradition. That tradition is important to us. And in fact, deans like to brag, so I'm going to brag. We just recently got, what our national rankings are in terms of nutrition programs in Canada. And you're now in the presence of one of the top 3 nutrition programs in the country. And the reason why that is not only because of the great work of the people in the college today, but because of the amazing history of home economics. And really, they're the forefront that led to the success that we have today. So with that, we actually asked the Edith Bowles Simpson Committee to help not only co-sponsor this event, but do a tribute to Dr. Edith Rolls Simpson as part of this celebration today. So with that, I'll ask Kim Kennett to come up, representing the Edith Rolls Simpson's Lecture Committee, to talk about the tribute and the rich history that led to ultimately having this lectureship in her name. So please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kim Kennett, and I'm honored to pay tribute to Dr. Edith Rolls Simpson. I am also very pleased to cordially welcome David McInnes, who has kindly accepted our invitation for the 2019 Dr. Simpson Rolls Lecture as a featured panelist. We know if Dr. Simpson was with us, she would have been more than delighted to meet you and your distinguished fellow panelists to discuss and share ideas on the challenges and opportunities facing the food system. Edith Rolls was born in Manchester, England. She came to Canada as a young child, first to Manitoba, and later to a homestead on the Alberta-Saskatchewan border. It was in Empress, Alberta that she completed her secondary education, followed by normal school in Saskatoon. She taught for several years in rural schools prior to completing the degree of Bachelor of Household Science in 1932 and winning the Rudder Prize as Most Distinguished Graduate. Miss Rolls joined the University of Saskatchewan Extension Department in 1932, becoming the first girls' work supervisor in the Department of Women's Work in 1936. This involved conducting farm girls' camps, extension courses, and the establishment, together with Bertha Oxner, of homecraft clubs for girls and the forerunner of 4-H clubs. In 1938, Miss Rolls received the Master of Science degree in Extension from the University of Wisconsin. In 1941, she was appointed assistant professor in the College of Agriculture, and in 1944 joined the faculty of the then College of Household Science, teaching part-time. At the same time, she was appointed the first Dean of Women at the University of Saskatchewan. She became a full-time professor in 1950, taking a leave of absence to achieve a doctorate in education from Columbia University in 1956. She became Dean of the College of Home Economics from 1965 until her retirement in 1972. During her academic career, she authored Home Economics in Canada, The Early History of 6 College Programs. With funding from the Saskatchewan Research Council, she undertook seminal research in Canada on freezing foods at a time when home freezers were coming into more common use. Her research also focused on the preservation and use of cultivated and native fruits of Saskatchewan, in addition to the freezing of vegetables most suitable for prairie gardens. The publications that resulted from these studies were very popular and widely used in the prairies and beyond. Under her leadership, the programs of the college were revised, new specializations added, and the first graduate students were admitted. In 1964, Dr. Rolls married Professor George Simpson, the distinguished former head of the university's history department. Dr. Simpson's contribution to the profession of home economics were highly significant. She was a founder and president of the Saskatchewan Home Economics Association, now the Association of Saskatchewan Home Economists, which I'm proud to represent today. She served as president of the Canadian Association and was active in the Saskatchewan and Canadian Dietetics Association. Dr. Simpson worked to establish the Canadian Organization of Deans and Directors of University Home Economics Programs and published articles on history, development, and philosophy of the profession. In 1974, friends, colleagues, and alumni made possible the establishment of the Dr. Edith Rolls Simpson Lecture in her honor. Dr. Simpson was recognized by many associations with their prestigious awards, fellowships, and life memberships. In 1972, as a member of the International Federation of Home Economics, she gave the keynote address at its international conference in Finland. Other honors include induction to the Agriculture Hall of Fame in recognition of her contributions to agriculture and rural life in the province. She received the Canada Centennial Medal, and in Saskatoon's centennial year, 1982, the Century Saskatoon Award. In 1987, Dr. Simpson was appointed a member of the Order of Canada by Governor General Jean Sauvé. The University of Saskatchewan awarded her an honorary Doctorate of Laws degree in October 1993 in recognition of her exceptional contribution to homes, families, and education. Important as Dr. Simpson's achievements were, they don't fully capture the essence of this remarkable woman, namely her humanity, her love of Saskatchewan and its people, her integrity, and her sincere concern for others. Those who knew her personally and professionally were richly blessed. Dr. Simpson passed away in December 1997 at the age of 92. What a wonderful woman, what a legacy. The first Edith Rolls Simpson Lecture was held in 1974 and continues to provide our community with insights into important and intriguing topics. The lecture committee is delighted to keep in touch with the Caldwell family in Saskatoon, who were very close to Dr. Simpson. We know Dr. Simpson would be most proud to support this collaboration with the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition and AgWest Bio, with a focus on ending global malnutrition and commending the essential role that pulses play in achieving this imperative goal.
So the African Proverbs says it takes a village to raise a child. And in our case, we say to feed the child, because you see, the project that we've done in Ethiopia for the past 20 years really has taken a village. College of Agriculture and Bioresource, College of Arts and Science, Colleges of Pharmacy and Nutrition. But along with our many team members, some who are here today, we have two deans who've been really, really supportive. You've heard from Dean Mary Burr, who has been one of our real great supporter, our cheerleader, and Dean Kish Wasson. And I have to mention Kish because you see, this is really the last time we're co-hosting, because he goes to Toronto, University of Toronto in June as the Dean of Pharmacy. And I know he's going to have difficulty saying, remembering to say not nutrition. He's going to say Dean of Pharmacy and Nutrition. So Kish, so many thanks. So Rob Norris, who is going to take over now, is the senior business strategist, and more recently, he is government relations with the CLS or synchrotron. I'd like to tell a little story about Rob, though, because when I first came to Saskatoon, Rob was the director of global relations, and I remember talking to him about how do I get a grant to start international work, and we talked about the IBD, and he says, you know, that's going to take a lot of effort, and you have to have the strength to be able to get through that. Rob would go on to the government in many roles, and I would quietly send him information on how well we were doing. And when he came back to campus, his first words to me was, "How can I help?" He's been with our team ever since. Rob?
Carol, thank you so much for that kind introduction. I think Eric was looking for a different kind of story, so I appreciate your graciousness. Yeah. You know, I'm absolutely honored to be here in such esteemed company, and to all of our speakers, Eric, most especially to you for joining us today. We know how busy you are. Eric simply has a number of responsibilities. He's the MLA for the university riding. He's also caucus chair. And in our current government's wisdom, that means he is closely connected. He's the, if you want, the link between executive council and the caucus. And for those of us on campus, that's like having an extra minister. And so he plays a very, very vital role in helping to make sure that knowledge and wisdom that we have available here, the experience of a really remarkable series of institutions clustered around the University of Saskatchewan, that it's never overlooked in public policy deliberations. And so, Eric, we know you do it quietly, but I know how important that is, and thanks for taking time. You know, when we think about the University of Saskatchewan and so many affiliated and associated organizations across this campus, and in fact across the province, it kind of opens a window on the history of Saskatchewan. And not many would be surprised that we're going to play a key role for Canada, and in fact for the world, when we think about the Sustainable Development Goals, those 2030 goals, those goals associated with trying to help ensure that one of those 17 is ending malnutrition. And they won't be surprised because, well, when Saskatchewan was a new province and people saw a land of opportunity, it was the newly established University of Saskatchewan with its newly established College of Agriculture at the time that helped put some wind in those sails. That sense of opportunity was going to rely on science. And as war came, no one would be surprised that the University of Saskatchewan's president, President Murray, was the Western Canadian representative to the Government of Canada that recommended the establishment of the National Research Council. It helps to explain why we have that building here today. No one would be surprised that in times of crisis, in times of drought and desperation that touched so many families on the prairies, the University of Saskatchewan and its associated institutions within the provincial government and federal government helped overcome the worst of the Depression. Science called to the assistance of helping overcome a tragedy. And in wartime again, called into action. And since the war, an era of really remarkable prosperity, opportunity, peace, an opportunity for us to reflect on what our global opportunities and obligations are. We're not surprised that the University of Saskatchewan, through the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition, the College of Agriculture and Bioresources, and so many other entities and units on and beyond this campus, is helping to mark World Pulse Day and helping to move forward with a review of the Global Nutrition Report. And so I'm delighted to be able to be here tonight to join all of you and to begin the next round by offering the opportunity to Dominic Schofield to come up and provide an overview of the Global Nutrition Report. And after that, we'll get some key participants up to field some questions, first from me and more importantly from all of you, about the significance of this day, the significance of pulse crops, and what it means when we think about the Global Nutrition Report, and most especially that 2030 goal of helping everyone in this world overcome what we have been able to overcome, that is malnutrition. Dominic, why don't we get you to come up and provide us an overview.
Many thanks, Rob. Thank you, Carol and Dean Quiche, for inviting me to speak about the Global Nutrition Report. 24 hours ago, I was in Kenya, in Laikipia, which is an arid region in the north, and was walking around with some farmers farming cattle, farming other livestock as well. And as we were walking,
You were thinking it was too warm.
I felt like it was pretty nice. And they would point to the ground and say, "Oh, look at that! That's hyena." And look, a little paw print of a hyena. I went, "Oh, that's great." And then they said, "Oh, look, that's leopard." And the more they would talk, the less secure I felt. I thought, these people are pretty tough. And so, of course, I had to whip out my phone and show a picture of what snow looks like, and how tough I am shoveling snow every day. and some shots of me in traffic and snow, and you know, had to somehow match their toughness. And then I came here, and I felt kind of wimpy, and I saw somebody biking today as well, riding their bicycle, and I thought, I am not tough at all in any sense. But you know, part of Rob, your story, I think, in the founding of this university, and some of the questions about why here, given all of the abundance and wealth of Saskatchewan, is that it's a big place with big ideas, and where you can get a lot done, as you've demonstrated. And I would say that with the warm reception I've received, it's also a very warm place in any season. And so I really appreciate the honor of speaking with you today, and the constant warm welcomes that I get every time I come. I'm just going to set this up so that I don't overspeak. If you'll excuse me for a second. Great. So I'm going to just give a little bit of context to the Global Nutrition Report, which you have here in your packs. It's a heavy document. I'm not going to do it justice. I'm going to try to give a little bit of context and sort of frame what it's trying to say and the significance of the report. Thanks a lot, Rob. Let's see if I get this right. There we go. And so it's framed first really in the context of some of the drivers of inequity, of injustice around the world. And there isn't anything perhaps more striking than when a baby dies. And so a lot of the impetus for original investments in addressing malnutrition had a lot to do with reducing child mortality. And when I started working in nutrition not that long ago, in 2002, 12 million kids under the age of 5 died globally. And so we have made some significant progress over the years to reduce that level by really addressing some of the most preventable means of or drivers of that mortality, primarily pneumonia and diarrhea. But still, we're looking at nearly half of all child deaths under the age of 5 being attributable to malnutrition. So there's still a lot of work to do. And in some regions of the world, much more likelihood of children dying as well. I guess another element of the story, of course, is one that we know well because we hear about it a lot, and that is around hunger. And the fact that nearly 800 million children tonight will go to bed hungry. People, excuse me, will go to bed hungry. So that's, you know, obviously a huge number. The scale of the problem requires us to meet that challenge at scale as well. But we're also looking at what has often been called hidden hunger, the hunger of vitamins and minerals that we need to develop our bodies and our minds. And that hunger is less easy to see. It manifests differently. But again, equally devastating to households, to personal growth and development, and to whole economies. The striking thing, of course, though, and this is something that we've always thought of as happening in the North, is this massive tsunami of overweight and obesity that is striking at the same time. Nearly 2 billion people overweight or obese. And so really the new normal, the new normal that we're facing now is that it's no longer about the North and the South. It's a universal problem. No country is escaped malnutrition. And in fact, even in the same household, we're seeing stunted children. We're seeing whole families that are deficient in key vitamins and minerals, and we're seeing overweight and obesity in the same family. In fact, they're often related as well. So this is you know, in the environments where we're working in developing countries, already a big enough challenge when you're trying to address undernutrition. But when you add the weight of the health costs associated with overweight and obesity, that's crippling. It just sinks the whole system. And that's a growing trend. Some of the other statistics are here. They relate to, again, large-scale numbers. I won't go through them in great detail. You can read them there. But again, it's just to say that, you know, kind of a single intervention approach or any one sector is not going to solve this problem. We need to come together with comprehensive programs to do things at scale that can be sustained. This is just a little bit of an illustration of what it means to be stunted. I was in northern Ghana in Toulon district a while back, and at this state-of-the-art facility, moms and their babies would be weighed nutrition counseling would happen. And this is a typical growth chart. I wonder if this is going to work. Oh, there we go. This is a typical growth chart where you can see the two curves there. That's the sort of the healthy band to be born in and to develop in, particularly over the first year, which is here. Sorry, folks, on that side, that bit. And then through the second year as well. That first year is, in fact, when most babies die, if they're not getting the nutrition that they need or if they succumb to preventable diseases. And so in this particular case, you can see the baby was born the right weight. When they hit about 6 months old and were no longer being breastfed, they needed additional food, complementary food to consume, you can see that started to falter off the curve. And then over that year, continued to falter. By about 2 years old, it starts to stabilize. And that's essentially stunting. It's the same mechanism, and it becomes a chronic issue. And of course, it becomes multi-generational as well. A stunted child may become overweight and obese, is more likely to before the age of 5. They're also, if they're a girl, much more likely to have babies of low birth weight that also be stunted and so on. So it's something to arrest. It's a cycle to arrest and to focus on. It also, of course, has hidden implications around brain development. Here you have a rather extreme case, but you'll see the scan of the brain on the left-hand side is a healthy brain, and the one on the right is one that's been neglected nutritionally. In this case, severely neglected, so you could see the difference. But, we're not just talking about height. We're also talking about the mental capacity, productive capacity, and this is what weighs on economies that are, trying to compete and to grow. I mentioned earlier that we're seeing both stunting and overweight and obesity happening together. This is a graph that shows on the left-hand side stunting going down. Fantastic. But it's not gone. And we're already seeing huge surge in overweight and obesity. In fact, an increase of more than 50% between 2003 and 2011. This, I'm not sure if you can see the countries here, but this shows boys and girls. Boys are on the light blue bars and girls are on the dark blue bars in a number of different countries showing their, children age 5 to 17, so mostly focused on children and teenagers, showing the levels of overweight and obesity. And you can see Canada, fifth from the bottom, right here. It's an old stat, 2004, but, with significant levels. So it's an issue that we're facing here, of course, in Canada as well. One of the aspects of the Sustainable Development Goals that is different from the Millennium Development Goals that preceded it is that it really identifies these issues of development as actually universal issues that need to be addressed in all countries. It's not just a southern issue that we need to fund development projects for, but really need to think about what areas of development are necessary in the north as well. This is some stats on diabetes cases, one of the most important non-communicable diseases, of course, that are a result of many factors, including malnutrition. And the cost of this, of course, is significant as well. In addition to deaths, of course, some Nobel laureate economists came together to look at what the impact on the economy was. And here we see a $2 trillion estimate of global GDP, which is more than smoking and war. Friends at Global Panel and the Friedman School at Tufts put together this chart, and it shows that 6 of the 11 risk factors for the global burden of disease are actually diet-related. This is difficult to read, and so I think that this presentation will be given as a resource later on, but this is really showing how different elements of diet line up with the prevalence of disease as a risk factor. And so this is analysis that's done that looks at, for example, overconsumption of processed foods, for example, or of salt, and what that does to different disease vectors, non-communicable diseases primarily. How too little vegetables, too little healthy foods, in fact, affect health as well. And this is not a rural problem or an urban problem. It's actually both. And so what this graph shows, and I'm not going to ask you to try to read all those countries, but in each of these countries, urban women and rural women are equally underweight and overweight. And so it's, again, a holistic challenge, and we're very used to in the nutrition sector sort of isolating things and becoming specialists and only working on that one factor, when in fact the data keeps coming in and keeps reminding us that we need a comprehensive approach to address these issues. Here in Canada, we're not exempt. And just with stats looking at food insecurity, we can see the numbers quite high. Lowest in Alberta, highest in Nunavut. In fact, as high as many countries in Africa that we're very worried about. This is on our shores. So why invest in nutrition? There's a lot of argument about it's the right thing to do, of course. But there are economic arguments as well. Here's some varied statistics talking about the cost effectiveness of investing in addressing malnutrition. And for every dollar that gets put into addressing malnutrition with nutrition-specific interventions, returns $16. So these are pretty good bets from an economic perspective as well. And you can see some of the other statistics here that help to make the case for the investment. So this is the fifth Global Nutrition Report. And the reason it's important is because in a very specialized field like nutrition, there's an awful lot of fragmentation. And it's been elusive to get a single voice about these issues of malnutrition and how to address them. A lot of competing ideas about where the priorities should be. And so the Global Nutrition Report, after decades, is finally a common voice that has been a key vehicle for consensus, generating consensus around a whole range of actors addressing malnutrition. And so it's significant in that sense. It's finally an opportunity for us to get our act together and look outwardly and to draw in others who are needed for the solution. Because no one sector owns nutrition. It's not just a health issue. It's not just a food issue. It's not just an education issue. It's not just an issue of poverty or even of knowledge. And so it really requires all sectors coming together. I guess, underwriting that is an understanding that governments don't feed nutrition to populations either. They need to set the enabling environment for that, but people rely on markets primarily. So the private sector has to play a strong role for us to be able to achieve the targets that we're pursuing. And so what we found, interestingly, as the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, were presented, was in fact that nutrition played such an important role in all of them. SDG 2, which is around reduced hunger, which you mentioned, Rob, of course is a central one. But it only contains, as you can see here, 7 of the 169 indicators. There are actually 56 indicators around nutrition that's spread across all of the SDGs. So if we really want to see the Sustainable Development Goals achieved holistically, we need to be thinking about the other Sustainable Development Goals, and we need to be thinking about how we address them, recognizing again that it's just not one sector or even one goal that we can operate within. We're going to have to be working together. So what's some of the progress on nutrition status? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the new normal is that no country is exempt. And so this slide shows us that at least 88% of countries are facing overlapping burdens. And this graph shows us how among the countries that reported to the Global Nutrition Report, what that overlap looks like. Unfortunately, 48% of countries are on track for at least one nutrition target. So, you think, okay, that's not bad, but these are targets for 2030. So if, we're not pursuing at least the 7 targets that we've got lined up, if not the 56, then we're in trouble, frankly. And, despite the fact that we're making some progress, that progress is too slow for us to be able to achieve the targets that we've set. Some countries are showing great promise, particularly on some important interventions, but others continue to be lagging behind. This is a chart showing the reduction of stunting, really since the last 7 years as we've been collecting data, which is terrific. But we're seeing overweight not really moving. And so that's the prevalence. The population's growing. And so we really are trying to paddle upstream and staying in one spot on that role. And of course that will have significant impact on health systems and the cost of addressing non-communicable diseases. In a context where 169 million people are on the move, internally displaced people, refugees, no longer often represented by their governments, conflict is becoming a reality that is the context for a lot of the work that we would do to try to address malnutrition. And of course, conflict is a manifestation of a whole range of factors, including environmental pressures, as well as economic pressures. And so, to try to think about how we address malnutrition in those contexts, again, equally important. But we're finding that what this graph shows, excuse me, that moved too quickly. Sorry. Yeah, what this graph shows, I'm pressing too quickly here. What this graph shows is, in fact, both in terms of wasting and stunting, that it's significantly more prevalent in conflict settings, and of course that seems intuitive. Rates of anemia among women also continue to be climbing in terms of numbers. Most of that in Asia. The prevalence highest in Africa, and so there's very little change there as well. Exclusive breastfeeding, really important to reduce child mortality, really important for mental development, a whole range of other disease prevention pathways, is increasing in some cases, which is fantastic. But again, still a lot of pressure because of changes in society, workplace, for women to opt out of breastfeeding because it's just too difficult and not necessarily the support offered for them to do it. There's also significant challenges in adolescent nutrition. The sad irony is that young women, adolescent women in particular, are often the most marginalized at the household. They're the least likely to have any control over their bodies, whether they're going to the clinic because they're ill or choosing what to eat, who to marry. And so many are getting married off too young. Many aren't getting the education that they need, and they're not getting the nutrition that they need either. And it's precisely that population that we need to be reaching, and we're failing. Less than half of girls are in school despite huge investments. The fact that the public health system isn't reaching them either also begs the question, what do we do? And so innovative ideas about how to mobilize youth, how to mobilize young women, rather than trying to reach them perhaps, will allow us to reach them. And again, there's a market dimension to that. So, there are a number of countries that have reduced adult obesity rates. Anybody want to hazard a guess how many? Yeah, not a whole lot. And so that, again, that's very concerning given the numbers that we're trying to deal with and how crippling that will be to our economies. This is a slide on what's happening here at home in Canada, and there are both huge gaps in data, but also the fact that pretty clearly Canada is not meeting its targets. And so, what do we do about that? How do we address that? How do we become more deliberate about it? As I mentioned earlier, diet is a key driver of disease burden, but also, of course, in preventing malnutrition. And so, a few thoughts on food system and diet. Of course, here, this is a bit of a funny picture, but it really is looking at some of the key aspects of what makes a nutrition-friendly diet and how we frame that in terms of the indicators that we want to follow. Diets of infants and young children are suboptimal everywhere, even when complementary feeding is initiated at the right time. We're seeing over and over again that the diet's inadequate. So they're not getting the nourishment that they need. There are, of course, a whole many reasons for that, and the report goes into that in more detail. No income group, not just the poor, are eating enough vegetables, whole grains or legumes, and all are drinking too much soda. So this is more than a behavioral issue, obviously. There's systemic issues to address. Again, that will require a joined-up effort. There are diet choices that relate to mitigating environmental pressures and climate change as well that are really important. Canada Food Guide just out makes some statements about that. There's a big movement globally to try to address food systems and diet, but within planetary boundaries. How do we do this in a way that can be sustainable? So sustainable, nutritious, safe food systems is really what we're pursuing. These are some of the relationships between greenhouse gas emissions and nutrition and diet. And and some of the impacts that sometimes we don't take into account around crop and livestock pests, the lowered nutrient density in crops in particular, and of course high spoilage and food waste. If all of the food waste were added up together in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, it would be the third largest emitter after the US and China. So these are significant issues, obviously, and without addressing them in a holistic way, we keep narrowing our scope for response. We keep making it much more difficult for us to respond. So this is a model of CO2 atmospheric concentration, and you can see even in the worst situation, we still got a little bit of a rise to do, and that's the green bar. But as I said, these are various models. In any case, CO2 levels are going up. And what that does is it affects the quality of the staple foods that we're relying on. In this case, this chart shows protein content in wheat flour significantly reduced. The wheat flour we're eating today is not the same as our grandparents in terms of nutrient quality. So we've been breeding for pest resistance, for production, and in doing so, sometimes making compromises on the nutritional quality. But it's not just the breeding, it's actually the environment's exerting this pressure as well. And of course, there's a feedback loop there. If we look at C3 grasses, C3 legumes, C4 grasses, this chart shows protein as well as some key nutrient traits, and they're all below par. In this case, rice protein manages to hover above. Key areas of concern, because these are staple foods that whole populations are relying on, that we're cultivating to feed populations, and as that population grows, we're producing more of it. Change in iron content by crop and elevated CO2 levels. Again, we're seeing here a case of rice for primarily Asia's consumption. But there's progress. It's not all a bad story. At least we've begun to recognize some of these challenges and the fact that we need a joined-up approach to address them. And they're reflected in new policies that influence consumer choice and behaviors, policies that also influence the staple foods that we're relying on, large-scale food fortification of staple foods with iron and folic acid, something pioneered in North America, is now in many countries around the world, and making big difference. Large percentage of countries have 3 or more nutrition targets that they've actually brought into policy, which again is very important. And there's a growth in data initiatives, keeping us accountable, but countries accountable to the targets, again, an important element of our strategy for response. So what does this mean in terms of money, in financing? What kind of funding flows are going to address malnutrition? Well, in the first slide, we'll see that disbursements over 2016, which is the latest consolidated data that we have, is nearly, it's $850 million. And so there's a plateau. The interesting thing, though, is that Canada fares quite highly as one of the key donors. So it's if we had to think about assets and positioning of Canada in response, we've been historically one of the big responders. Most of that health systems delivered. We've come, in this graph you'll see, I guess, 4th after the UK, US, and EU. But if we have to look over the last 5 years, Canada comes in first in terms of the volume of funding that's gone to addressing malnutrition, particularly nutrition-specific initiatives. And nutrition-specific is a bucket of initiatives that that there's evidence for, that the Lancet published, that are mostly health systems delivered. And less on the nutrition-sensitive side, which are more the food and prevention elements of addressing malnutrition. These are some of the numbers that we have. You can scan those. Nutrition-sensitive, again, meaning primarily food-based approaches, agriculture, food processing. And you can see that, again, Canada fares very well, one of the most significant investors in food systems. So we've got some track record here in Canada that, at least globally, we can work on and build from. This again is another depiction of where the funding is going. This one related to non-communicable diseases. Canada fares less well here, although we are one of the top donors. A lot more could be done. In terms of domestic spending, we're seeing again, 47 countries conducting analyses on their nutrition spending. So we don't have a full range of countries that we've looked at. We've tried to cobble this together at the Global Nutrition Report. But again, significant funding starting to flow in this direction as well. But too little, you know, when we're looking at the overall magnitude of the problem and what's required. The 6.8, I think, yeah, $6.8 billion of investment, $6 billion of that in ag. Significant. Significant also because this is an indication of potential cost share with the private sector. So industry in ag knows now that there's actually funding flows going to emerging markets to address malnutrition that they may share in the pot to be able to make significant impacts on a sustainable basis. So we start to think about innovative finance and blended capital approaches to this. And so when we speak about business, ideologically, nutrition sector, particularly in the health side nutrition sector, has always been a bit shy to work with business. There's been a lot of distrust. And so, you know, the question is, how do you work that out? How do you start to work together in a complex environment where ideology sometimes prevents us from working together? And it really is a chicken and egg. Do you trust first and then engage? Do you engage first and then hopefully you build trust? It's still an issue that a lot of important people and governments and organizations are grappling with. It's not resolved. But some of the the key elements of how to build trust has to do with accountability and transparency. And so again, data. The role of the research community in collecting that data becomes a really important vehicle. It's not just about the research and being able to publish it. It's not just about the research so that we can reflect reality back to ourselves and say, this is where we're at. It's also actually a tool for engagement that's going to be very important to build trust. And so just to close, a few more slides. I think there are a few calls to action that we at the Global Nutrition Report feel are important. And they have to do with the positioning of nutrition as a topic within the Sustainable Development Goals, and that's an ongoing thing, of course, because lots of competing priorities, lots of important issues that are being addressed as well. To strengthen national accountability on nutrition, we believe is very important, and to set smart targets that hold governments accountable. The fact that we need to implement actions to address malnutrition, but to do it in a way that is well financed, to do it in a way that is based on alliances. And one important alliance, I think, one that hasn't really been established, is the alliance between the nutrition sector, agriculture, and the climate communities. I think there's a sweet spot that people in this room are actually sitting on related to pulses and World Pulse Day very appropriately being celebrated because the University of Saskatchewan and its partners in PIC and others are in fact right at the center of that convergence of economy, nutrition, and environment through pulses. And so this again is an asset that we can work with and perhaps expand on. So how much food is needed to feed the world in 2030? I think this is the wrong question, frankly. Recognizing that we need to look at a lot of other elements of food. I think the real question is what needs to happen to nourish the world now? It seems semantic, but I think it's an important difference. And new ways to empower women to participate in collective solutions, I think, is really important. There's tons of evidence, keeps being reestablished, that when women's economic status goes up, the nutritional status of members of the household go up. It just keeps coming through in the data, and so it's pretty obvious that that's an important element of the work that needs to happen, and one of the reasons why I think we're so pleased that our government, again another asset here, has taken such a strong position on the role of women and gender transformative approaches. Excuse me. We need to find new ways to create demand for healthy diets. A lot of the work is supply side, budget driven. It's like pushing a really heavy chain. You never quite get there, so working on the other side of this issue is also extremely important. New ways to support businesses, we've talked about that a little bit, and then new ways for governments to create the environment to enable it. So the 5 critical steps are these to speed our way forward. These 5 critical steps are what the Global Nutrition Report consensus is promoting, and they include coming, less of a single intervention approach, coming up with more comprehensive approaches to address the challenge. To prioritize and invest in the data needed to allow us to understand whether we're making progress or not. To maybe perhaps in the case of Canada address some of the gaps in data. to scale up and diversify financing for nutrition, not to rely only on taxpayers' money and government budgets, but to think about how we blend with other actors in society who have different kinds of money that can pay for different elements of the solution. Focus on healthy diets, not just individual nutrient responses, I think very important, and we've come a long way here in Canada there. And improving the targets and commitments that are driving our actors. Thanks very much for your patience. I hope that you'll read the report and enjoy it. Thank you.
Dominic, as always, your remarks are thorough, they're thoughtful and thought-provoking, they're accessible, and I hope what they do is set the stage for what we're going to do next, and have people maybe reflect on elements of what you've spoken about. For me, when you begin to reinforce the significance of women at the household level and the community level, that speaks volumes about the work that we've been doing for the last 20 years in Ethiopia. And we see the significance of that, as Mary's already mentioned. So what I'd like to do at this point is I'm going to invite up our participants. We're going to have, as I say, a bit of a round table where I'm going to help spur on some discussion, and then we're going to turn an opportunity over for those at the round table to also hear from you. So.